Alright, so we have a little application that will open up. We have our little ball. When we press the H key for horizontal motion, that ball will move across the screen. This is a good start. But we don't really have a simulator yet because a simulator is only as good as the information that it gives us, right? The purpose is to try and simulate some aspect of reality, and so we want to be able to get useful data, useful information from this simulator that matches very well to what we would actually see if we pushed a ball or dropped a ball or whatever we did. So we need some labels. We want to be able to see what is the position of the ball right now, what is the time right now. So we're going to add labels in this video. We're also going to add some indicators to start with, and probably in the next video we'll start being able to mouse over those indicators and actually see the value at different times. But right now we're going to focus on just getting our labels set up and getting those indicators on the screen. So we're going to escape out, and we're going to start making some new changes. So here in the we'll want lots of labels section, we're going to start making some. As always, feel free to pause it for a moment here and see if you can't make labels by yourself. You'll probably need to move them differently once you've got them set up. I've got some specific positions. You don't have to put them where I put them, but they're kind of out of the way where I put them. So we're going to want, let's see, we're going to want a clock label, and actually we're going to make two. We'll see why in a minute. We're going to call one clock label and one clock info. So we're going to want those. We're going to want an HPause label. Oops. An HPause info. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Actually, I was doing HPause, but just keep things consistent. Why don't we do XPause? XPause label, XPause info, and we'll do a YPause label. We'll do a YPause info. We'll do an XVEL, so X velocity label. And you can see we need a lot of labels here. XVEL, come on, get the capitalization right. And as always, the capitalization here is mostly for us. It's a little bit easier to read the different words if they're kind of broken up a little bit there. Let's see, so we've got an XVEL, we need a YVEL. YVEL info. Oops. And we're going to need a Y acceleration. Or do we? No, we don't need that because the Y acceleration isn't actually going to change. The acceleration is going to be the same regardless. So I think we're good there. We've got these. So take a moment here and make these labels. And you'll need a clock label, clock info, etc., etc. See if you can't make them on your own here. Okay. So we are going to make a label, and again, if you open the parentheses, it'll tell you what you need here. You want what your label to say. In this case, we want it just to say clock, right? The font size we're going to set to 18, kind of a little bit smaller, but again, we're going to keep this out of the way. Position, we're going to set the clock label to the screen width minus 180. The YPause for the clock label. When we look at it here, I've got it all. Oh, I'm sorry. Back up. 50. I'm looking at the wrong one. Screen width minus 50. I've done all this beforehand rather than like figure it all out, and because it's kind of tedious. You just have to reposition it until it looks good to you, right? So I've kind of done that ahead of time. We're going to set it 30 from the top of the screen. We're going to set the font color to white. We have a nice dark background, so white font looks pretty good. We're going to set that font to Arial. And then we're going to leave the background clear. And actually, if you don't need the things at the end, what it tells you in that little drop-down list is what it's going to default to if you don't specify it. So since I want the background to be clear anyway, and I do want the font to be Arial as well, I can actually just stop right there at white. We'll close the parentheses, and we'll be good. And the rest of that will just default to what I wanted it to. Okay. I also want to make a label for the clock info. I'm going to start it at 0, so we're just going to put in quotations there the number 0, so that's a string, but it's going to look to us like the number 0. We're going to do everything at a font size of 18, just about everything anyway. The clock info, let's make that the screen width minus 100. Let's do 30 as well for the clock info. So they're going to be at the same height, y up and down wise, and we'll do white. But one is the actual number is going to be a little bit to the right of the label here. Now you could just do one thing. You could do make label. Actually, let's in the clock section here. We don't need to. You could do clock plus. And we'll probably want a space here. You could do this. You don't have to worry about typing this, and we're not going to leave it this way. And this would work as well. And then you could change this part of the string later. We could change that into a variable, and that would work. The problem is that since we're going to have lots of different labels that are different lengths, like the word horizontal position is going to be a different length than the vertical position, it would mean that our numbers wouldn't line up nicely, and so it would mean we'd only have half as many labels. So that's kind of nice. But in order to get things to line up nicely, we're going to make twice as many labels as we actually need. We're going to have one that's just going to be the word. So in this case, the word clock, and that's never going to change. And the second label is the number that's actually going to change over time, and we'll do that a little bit later. And this way, they all stay nice in line with each other. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and comment these out. I'm just putting. We're just telling the computer to ignore these for a moment. I'm putting some pound signs in front of these variables here, so it's going to ignore all this. And let's just see if our clock shows up where we want it to. So we're going to run that. Oh, it didn't. What did I do wrong here? So okay, so I don't see anything. I was expecting to see it up here. I haven't told my computer to draw the label, right? I've defined it. I've told it what I want it to think of clock label as, but I haven't actually told it to draw it. So down here, let's put a comment in just again for us, and we'll say display our labels. Okay, underneath of that heading, we're going to do show label, and in this case, I want it to show the clock label, and we're going to do show label clock info. Okay, so now we should be able to see those. Let's try that again. Alright, so we have added up here, although it looks like I'm backwards. We've added up here the word clock, and we've added up here the number 0. So let's flip these. I want the clock to be in front of the number 0. That should have been obvious. Maybe to some of you it was. We're going to switch those numbers so that now the actual word clock is further to the left than the number 0. Right, so that should read a little better. While we're here also, let's go ahead and it's good to get in the habit of adding comments so you can see it later. And I should have commented this to begin with, but let's say something like initial ball values. And that way later on, if we're looking for these, that's just a little clue to us that, hey, if you're looking for the starting values for the ball, they're right here. We look at the red text for things like that. Okay, let's run this again. Okay, so that looks better. I've got the word clock, and then I've got some number after it here. Okay, very good. So now let's go ahead and let's just do the same thing for all of these other labels. We'll get rid of those pound signs. There we go. And we'll make a bunch of these labels here. I think I'll speed up this portion of the video because it's just kind of repetition. You can do this on your own. We're going to call the X pause label. We're going to call that horizontal. Horizontal, there we go, it took a while. Position. Oops. And let's see, we're going to do 18 size font, screen width. Let's see, what do I have for my HPOS label? Minus 180. Okay, so screen width minus 180. And we're going to do for the position, we're going to do screen height minus 100. Notice that it follows it'll kind of start scrolling for you. When the window gets too wide, it can kind of be a bit of a pain, so try and widen that up. Scrolling left and right in idle is not the simplest thing, so I try and make sure my window's nice and wide. Okay, and I do want this to be white as well, and then I'm done with that. Okay, and actually I don't think, you can type this out each time you wanted to, but we could also just we're going to copy that, Control C, come down to the Y pause label, Control V will paste it in, and double clicking on a word will select the whole thing, We're going to do vertical position. Screen width minus 180 is still good, but we don't want that to be at the same height. We're going to start stacking these things. So the Y position here is going to be the screen height minus 80. We'll put it just a little bit lower on the screen. And then we'll come down to the XVal. Again, we'll just paste that old one back in there. In this case, we just want the horizontal velocity. That's what we're going to call that one. Let's see, I think we'd do this one at 60 then. Yep, we're going to do this one at screen height minus 60, a little bit lower still. And finally, we're going to make the label vertical velocity. You could also, if you wanted to shorten this up, right, you could call this X position, you could call it Y position and X velocity and Y velocity, but just to make things clear, I'm going to use those longer words there. It's up to you, right? You're the one programming this. You do what you want to. Okay, so we've got those. We do want also to have these infos, so I'm going to, we'll go ahead and just paste that in there again. But now I want these all to start. We're just going to start them all at 0. We'll change them all later. We'll start them at 0, and we're going to want we're going to want a little bit further to the right. So we're going to set these to screen width minus 50. All right. And this should be pretty simple because now all the labels are going to be the same for these infos. We're just going to change the height. We're going to change them so that the height matches the word that they go with. So the YPOS info should be the same as the height of the YPOS label. The XVal info should be the same height as the XVal label, etc., etc. Oh, and some of you probably caught that I didn't change the screen height for my XVal label. So make sure we've got, okay, that set to minus 40 now. So this is what we should have for labels. I'll have the magnifier up at the top kind of look at each one of those. So make sure that yours matches these. We've got clock label and clock info here. XPOS label and XPOS info here. There we go. YPOS label and YPOS info. So that's what those should look like. And then finally, oh no, we got two more here. XVal label, XVal info should be those values. And then YVal label, YVal info should look like this. Okay. All right. So once we've got all that, we're going to go ahead and oh no, we're not. What have we done wrong? We haven't displayed these, right? So I'm going to grab this show label clock info. Control C just to copy that. And I need 8 more, right? So 1 paste, 2 paste, 3 paste, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so we've pasted that in 8 times, and now we're just going to change which show label we're going to be showing. So I'm going to double click on XPOS label and double click on this one. We're going to Control V to copy or paste that in there. The next one down, I'm going to double click on Control C. Next one down, double click on Control V. And we're just going to display each and every one of these labels down the line, like so. Oops. A little bit faster than typing it all out. All right, we're going to go ahead and run that. All right, so now we have the potential anyway for keeping track of some nice values down here. So that's good. And actually, let's go ahead and add one more, just because in a little bit we're going to want it. So we're going to finish up this video. We won't get to the dots. Looks like this one's already getting out of hand in time-wise. So we're going to go ahead. We're just going to add one more label. We're going to call it timer label, and we're going to have a timer info. And the difference between this and clock. So clock is we're going to use as kind of our universal time. It's just the time that our simulator thinks that it is. And the timer, we're going to want to mouse over different little indicators of where the ball has been in the past. And these timers are going to be what time it was when we drew that particular indicator. So a little bit confusing. Again, if you can think of a better a way to label this, maybe a word besides timer makes more sense to you, then by all means, go ahead. These words aren't set in stone, right? You can call them whatever you want. But I'm going to call it timer because that's what came to my head. And let's see here. Let's just go ahead and copy. We'll start with this here. The make label, we'll paste it in there. This we want to be, we'll just call this time. So the time that it drew that. And let's see, let's set that to screen height minus 120. We'll put that at the top of everything. Oh, that's the width. We want it to be minus 180 in the width. We'll come over here to height, minus 120. We want that to, we'll just put that on the top of our list there, and copy that, paste it in there, and now we want that at 0. And our screen width, we're going to change back over to screen width minus 50 to kind of set it where all those other numbers are as well. Okay. And finally, we are going to come down here. We're going to make sure that we're displaying that label as well. Copy that in there twice. We're going to copy the timer label, paste it in, copy the timer info, paste it in. Alright, so now we're getting there. Okay, so we've got, we're also going to keep track of the time that it drew those particular dots. When we mouse over a dot, what time did it draw that particular, dot. Okay, very good. So that's it for this video. We'll get to actually drawing dots in the next one. Stick around. The fun is just beginning.